Good morning and welcome to Rising. We've got a great show for you today. I am back in the chair, and so is my friend Lindsay Granger. You were in South Carolina. I was in Palm Springs. We've been all over the country, I guess.
I know. We're like doing a world tour. Maybe we should start campaigning together next.
Oh, campaigning for what or for who?
We have to talk a lot about that. Yes. But before we get there, let's talk about what's on your radar.
Well, what is America First, and who gets to define what that even means? According to Donald Trump, it's him. America First is, after all, a slogan closely identified with the president, probably second only to Make America Great Again. And to his credit, Trump has drawn considerable support for following through on promises to center American foreign policy on the needs of, well, America. When he first emerged on the political scene, Trump broke with years of bipartisan foreign policy consensus, particularly on the right. He was one of the only prominent political figures identified with the Republican Party who was willing to confidently and correctly assert that the war in Iraq was a grave mistake. And it's a theme he's largely stuck with. During his recent trip to the Middle East, Trump slammed neoconservatives and nation builders who wrongly think that American military might is the key to world peace. Why am I bringing this up now? Well, the neoconservative nation-building ethos is again trying to exercise control over U.S. foreign policy and over Trump himself. Indeed, the neocons are trying to redefine America First and trick Trump into thinking that their foreign policy, not his foreign policy, is what Americans want. I hope Trump doesn't listen. This is all happening amidst the backdrop of a war between Israel and Iran. Over the weekend, Israel bombed Iranian nuclear facilities and assassinated top Iranian generals. In response, Iran is retaliating. Now, the fight between Israel and Iran is a fight between an allied democracy and an Islamic theocracy. It's obvious who we are rooting for, Israel. But that doesn't mean the U.S. needs to join this fight. On the contrary, we should stay out of it entirely. Let me be extremely clear. Israel is free to pursue its own military objectives in defense of its people. But Israel does not and should not rely on U.S. military support and cover for its wars of choice against foes in the Middle East. They chose this, and that's fine. They have the right to choose it. We do not have the obligation to get dragged into the conflict. The U.S. has other, more pressing problems than sorting out the Middle East. I can't put it any better than conservative commentator Matt Walsh, who writes on X, Iran does not pose any credible threat to the United States. We do not need to get involved in yet another war in the Middle East for reasons that have nothing to do with defending our own nation. Unfortunately, Israel's government wants U.S. involvement, and so they're pretending that the U.S. was in on this attack from the beginning. In fact, the Israeli government has been so bold as to suggest that Trump's negotiations with Iran were kind of deliberate distraction that made this attack possible. That is a lie. Trump was negotiating with the Iranians because he knows negotiations are the only reasonable course of action. We don't want Iran to develop nuclear missiles, and so we are engaged in diplomacy that aims to thwart them from doing so. Israel should be all for this. But it seems that Israel was not on board with diplomacy, and Trump was not on board with this most recent attack. According to reporting in the Wall Street Journal, Netanyahu said to Trump on Monday that he would authorize the attack. Trump told him to hold off, insisting that the diplomatic approach to dismantling Iran's nuclear work should play out before turning to a military step. The headline of that report is, quote, Trump, a self-styled peacemaker, gets drawn into foreign entanglements. And that's exactly what's happening. A foreign power is trying to make their war our war. This is something that many America First conservatives are warning Trump against. As I said, Matt Walsh condemned it. Tucker Carlson has condemned it. So have countless others. In response, Trump pushed back. A correspondent for The Atlantic magazine called Trump over the weekend and asked him about Tucker Carlson's criticism specifically of Israel. In response, Trump said this, well, considering that I'm the one that developed America First and considering that the term wasn't used until I came along, I think I'm the one that decides that for those people who say they want peace, you can't have peace if Iran has a nuclear weapon. So for all of those wonderful people who don't want to do anything about Iran having a nuclear weapon, that's not peace. One aside, isn't it remarkable that Trump makes himself totally available to members of the mainstream media, even hostile ones? I wonder if Biden ever took any random calls from Atlantic reporters during his presidency. Yeah, didn't think so. Anyway, as to the substance of what Trump said, look, it's true, we don't want Iran to get a nuclear weapon. It's true that Trump is MAGA and the base listens to him and trusts him. But I suspect Trump knows, and his foreign policy team knows, that another unpopular war in the Middle East would be a catastrophic mistake. It would doom the rest of the agenda. It could take down Trump's entire presidency. as it doomed the presidency of the last Republican president, George W. Bush, who foolishly bet everything on the idea that Iraq would welcome us as liberators. Remember that? Some conservatives are currently doing a version of that, naively expecting the Iranian people to overthrow their despotic regime. I hope they do so. It's an inspiring dream, but it's just a dream. We have to be clear-eyed and wide awake about what's happening. America first means just that, America first. No more foreign entanglements.
I actually want to commend that balanced perspective. And I actually want to commend any conservative commentators that came to the table to say that we should de-escalate. This isn't about missiles and it isn't about a war per se. It's about people. There are civilians that have already died in both countries, and there are civilians in the United States, Iranian civilians, and Israeli civilians that don't want a war. And so when Trump said that he ran on and coined the term putting America first, I think the base of people that voted for him that want us to take care of our country's interests are also not satisfied with this being a solution. And I think when you go on TV most recently this weekend and say, sometimes you have to fight it out, well, fight it out doesn't just stop at the fight. We understand that Iran has close relationships, both military and economically, with China and Russia. And we understand what the implications are if the U.S. gets involved. And yes, we do support Israel as far as providing them with weapons and making sure that nobody gets past their Iron Dome. But when Israel is the instigator here, the United States has an option. We can either be the match or we can be the extinguisher. And I think our role diplomatically across the world, even with our allies, is to first try to be the extinguisher when there are fires around the world. And I think that we have to make sure that stance is clear and also tell Israel that even though they are an ally, we are not just going to willy-nilly sit by while they do anything. It's also important to note that it would take a year, even with the uranium that Iran has, to develop a nuclear weapon in full. So it's not like something would happen overnight that we wouldn't understand or know about, and provide ample time to make a decision that we needed to be involved in this escalation. But we're not there yet.
That's a key point. The hawks and their allies in the mainstream media have been saying, Iran, days away from a nuclear weapon. For years. We've heard that specific phrase, days away, over and over and over again. And look, in an ideal world, if I could snap my fingers and make it so they couldn't have a nuclear weapon, I would do that. If I could snap my fingers and have their despotic, religious, totalitarian regime replaced by a secular democracy or a kind of government that existed before the Islamic extremists took over, I would absolutely do that. I'm not saying like, oh, they're lovely, wonderful government. No, it's a despotism. But they are not a threat to the U.S. It's dubious whether they're even a threat to Israel, that we can shoot their missiles out of the sky. Ron Paul, hero of mine, used to point this out when asked about Iran. In the Cold War era, the Soviet Union, our enemies, had countless nuclear weapons. And they didn't attack us. We dealt with that. We still negotiated with them. We still did diplomacy with them. This is a tiny little nation with far less weaponry at its disposal than the Soviet Union, and we're not going to talk to them? We're going to be in fear of them? That makes no sense.
And the timing to me is the biggest thing. This happened on Thursday, the initial attack that Israel launched, but we were set to talk to them yesterday, Sunday, so they didn't even allow, even though this was the sixth round, negotiations take a while sometimes, they didn't even allow the diplomatic process to play out, which is really important. And Iran's now talking about exiting the non-proliferation treaty, NPT, which means that they are not longer agreeing to not build out nuclear warheads and being involved in oversight by the United Nations, which is a problem.
It is a problem.
So I think, we want to de-escalate, but we're going to talk about this much more. The suspect in the Minnesota lawmaker shooting is in custody after the largest manhunt in Minnesota state history. And now information on his political views is surfacing. That's up next.